done.
Yeah, makeup's all done, and
yeah. By the way,
nose is powdered.
Did you see my tweet about needing more money to buy the dip, and we should do an OnlyFans together where we do feet pictures?
I did see that. Yeah, and I saw some people poking back with some funny photos. I thought it was well done. Well done.
Yeah. We need to fight for equal pay on OnlyFans for men.
People pay more for you. I think it's the accent.
Could be. No, I mean, like between like girls.
Oh,
and
men
guys.
and women. Oh, okay.
Yeah, men and women. Yeah.
I was thinking everyone would flock to your videos, and my videos are to sit there with like one view and a bad comment.
Well, we divide the revenue and we buy this dip. Cool. So welcome everyone, and this is Rocket Lab Weekly, episode 79. Europe is finally on summertime, so we're back to the normal schedule. And this week we have Matt Money with us, and we have both been very much liberated of our portfolios. Yeah, how's everyone doing? How are you doing, Matt?
I'm really good. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I've been surprisingly calm about this. Been able to add more money to the portfolio, so that's been good. But yes, down a significant portion of cash, probably more than my house is worth. So people are probably like, oh, maybe Matt didn't lose so much. No, the number's pretty significant. But at the end of the day, I think there's a larger scheme abroad, or maybe scheme makes it sound more mischievous, but there's a broader plan that I think needs to be followed through, and we can touch on it even deeper, or we can just leave it there. But I think we need to give it a couple more weeks before we truly say that it's a failed policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely we need to touch on it. It's funny. I like doing videos way more when the market is down. I don't know why, because I feel that that's when like people need us, and they need the calm heads and to go through the data. And I must say, out of all the crashes that I have lived through, this is my favorite one so far, because I feel that the actions that are being done, they're like super bullish on the long term, right? So like, for example, Doge is making so that the US is not going bankrupt. I mean, that's, I guess it's kind of good for US companies, no? And the US taxpayers. And the tariffs, it's like, whatever you think about the tariffs, it's like currently I feel like 150% of the negativity is priced in. Anywhere I go, I only see like bad about the tariffs. And I'm like, regardless of what you think about tariffs, it's like nothing in this universe is 100% bad. Like, even if you hate tariffs, there has to be some plus point in it, like that it brings more government revenue, and and then on top of it, I'm like, what if it works? Like, what if it will have the intended effect? And I myself, I'm very sure that what was announced on liquidation day is just a negotiating tactic, and I think Trump was president in the Trump 1.0, and he was told to wait with closing the wall, because like Paul Ryan said, it's your first year, and wait with it, and then he could never get it done. And then he realized that the waiting game is maybe like he only has 4 years, and it's midterm soon. And I think that he went all out, and he's like, okay, I'm doing the full Trump agenda, and then the pain needs to come now, and then it has time to ease off. So what do you think, Matt, about the current scene on the market?
I think it's interesting. We haven't even seen tariffs actually go into effect yet, right? That still has to happen on Wednesday. So the fact that we're already down 18 to 20% without having actually put a tariff into place as of yet, really, is pretty interesting. I think that people are freaking out more with the severity, but I think if anything, based off of what I've seen so far, this is as bad as it's going to be. I think there might be a 5% chance that if reciprocal tariffs, or we have a standoff with Europe or China, or they raise tariffs even more so to offset some of this, that we could experience a little bit more or worse impacts overall. But I give it a 95% chance that this is the worst that it's going to be, and there's going to be some coming to the table to be able to reduce And I think it's all just a negotiation tactic to make sure that businesses get brought back to America. And I still think that there's a lot of opportunity going forward with Doge, in tandem with Doge, as tandem with the business tax cuts that are going to happen later on in the year, that I think might partly or fully offset the impacts of what's going on, from a stock perspective.
Oh yeah,
So
that too. And we're going into this shite with, you know, very high interest rate. Like that's also very interesting. So I feel like 150% of the negative side has been priced in and none of the positive side. And there is very positive things happening, I think.
precisely, yeah. I think August 5th, we've kind of hit those lows and actually surpassed those lows slightly by a couple percentage points. And pretty much all the value that everyone was thinking, going into the election, business tax cuts and Doge and all these things about, the positives were built in when we got to January timeframe. And since January, everyone's only been focusing on the negative. And I think it's highly been a focus of the media specifically because it sells news. And I think at the
Yeah.
end of the day, what we're going to realize is it's not really that big of a deal. And I think we have to wait 2 to 3 weeks and maybe even through the first quarter earnings. I think Steve Fiorillo says that pretty well. Like until the end of April, we don't really hear about what the impacts will be. And I feel like it's going to be not much. And even if it is anything, that will be offset by when they lower the business tax cuts to 21%. So, some certain companies might get impacted very heavily. Companies that import a lot, like Nike, obviously took a massive hit. But overall, I think it's going to be a place where it all comes out even in the end. And, it won't be too bad as most people are forecasting. I think
Yeah.
it's over exaggerated. Is there a potential 5 to 10% hit on some of the EPSs for certain companies, or even more so for specific companies that rely specifically? But supply chains, you can get those rerouted within 6 months to a year. It might be a pain in the ass, but if things are really that bad and certain countries won't play ball, hire Palantir. They'll help you figure it out. We talked about that good bit last night. And then, yeah, just overall, I think people are giving it a dying wish before it even gets started.
Yeah. And I make a prediction. So right now the market is like pricing in all the negativity. But what happens next week if, let's say, it's announced that Vietnam has made a deal and their tariff is paused, Italy has made a deal and their tariff is paused, and I think there was one more country that said that they're like, I think Vietnam has basically dropped all their tariffs to zero and said that we're coming to the table. So what happens when you start having these chain of announcements? I mean that we have to have a very nice relief rally at that point, because then it's like, oh, it's a negotiating tool, and the tariffs are not permanent as long as people make a deal.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to look at the imbalance. I mean, I don't want to make this too political, but I think it's very obvious. We import a lot of Japanese cars. We import a lot of German cars. We import a lot of UK vehicles as well. Jaguar, Range Rover, etc. But if you go to the European Union or the UK, you see very little American cars, aside from maybe Teslas. So to me, it's like that's not very fair, is it?
I mean, the funny thing is that, like, to be honest, I'm saying it as a European, like it might also have to do with that because you understand, like when you have a good car to sell, like you see a lot of it. Like if you drive around, there's a shit ton of Teslas, and they are EU cars, or sorry, US cars, right? And yeah, so I think that if you because Europe is a bit special, like we like smaller cars, that is very gas efficient, and the American gas guzzling humongous. I mean, like the Cybertruck cannot even be released in the EU in its current form because it's just too big. Like it doesn't fit any regulations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. 100%.
So I think it's like I understand that point, but I think it also has to do with other factors than just the. Yeah, and there's quite a lot of Fords. I actually drive a Ford,
Hmm.
and
The more you know.
bought a lot of Fords, by the
There you
way,
go.
during my time.
There you go. But I think, you know, people are sitting there. A key example, sticking on the car reference. I forget what, I think it might have been Reagan, or maybe it was a different president that put a 25% tax on foreign trucks that come into the United States. And so since then, Toyota obviously has started to make a lot of their Tundras actually in Texas. And that has performed very well. I see a lot of Tundras on the road here in the United States. So to be able to surpass something like that, that 25% tariff there, you know, we had them build, and they're proud, you know, and a lot of people love to buy the Tundras because they're made in America. You know, people are like, oh,
Yeah,
sometimes these Tundras, these Toyota Tundras, are more American than the actual Chevys or the other cars, because they might be partially assembling in Mexico or partly assembling in Canada. So people take pride in the fact that they buy Tundra because it's 100% American made.
by the way, guess what car my family is driving? A seven-seater.
Expedition. I don't know.
Chevrolet. What is it called? Chevrolet. I can't remember the model.
Tahoe, Suburban.
No. Captiva.
Ah, high flyer.
Yeah. So I drive an American car as a European. Cool. So with this backdrop, I felt like we had to speak about this. So Rocket Lab stock price is sort of in the toilet. We went from 30 to what are we now? 18, 17?
15, 16 at the worst yesterday.
Yeah, that was pretty good. So we're gonna go through the news. There was a lot of space news, and then we're gonna speak about if it's time to buy the dip in Rocket Lab. Cool. So we start with the first one. I mean, actually, I wanna skip the order and go to this tweet because we were already talking about tariffs. I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. How Rocket Lab gets affected by tariffs. And our dear friend Tim, who is a Rocket Lab bear and an ASTS bull, I'm being sarcastic, by the way, did a very good tweet. So he said, with the markets going crazy, it is actually more relevant exercise to determine how tariffs could hit Rocket Lab's products based on what we know. So New Zealand was hit with a 10% tariff, EU with 20, Canada with 25. But I think the separation systems may fall under the free trade agreement because when discussed on the past call, management said minimal impact on this line item. So how does this impact Rocket Lab products? Electron has a limited impact on commercial missions since those launch from Mahia anyway. So, and they have a lot of international buyers like we are, you know, Kinéis is a French company. Then we have the IQTS, or I don't remember. Do you remember the name? The Japanese one, IQP something. So anyways, those companies are definitely not affected by the tariffs. Carbon fiber source material is mainly from New Zealand, how I understand it. So that could make products 10% more expensive. Not sure how big the US supply could be for Rocket Lab. Neutron, longer term, very limited impact since almost all production and launch operations will take place in the US. Most significant impact is the reaction wheel business since they build those large-scale Amazon Kuiper in New Zealand, which are now slapped with 10% tariffs. Solero is safe since it's US. Mynaric is in the EU with customers mainly in the US, so 20% tariffs will really hurt. However, I think Mynaric has a factor in California, if I'm not...
I think that statement's bullshit.
Exactly. So, and so basically, Rocket Lab launches from New Zealand, has a lot of customers outside of the US, so very well diversified. The US customers, many of them are government customers, and it's going to be super easy to pass on the cost of the tariff. And it's funny, like the government is basically taxing itself to get more money in the government. I don't know how that works or doesn't. So I think Rocket Lab is very safe from tariffs. And that also means if we have significant drops because of tariff fears, that's really good time to buy the stock. What do you think, Sir Matt?
Yeah, at a $15-16 billion, $15-16 stock price, you're looking at a company that's worth $7.5 to $8 billion market cap. To me, I still think that there's still a significant distance between the number 2 and the number 3 launch provider in the Western Hemisphere. It will soon, within the next 6 to 12 months, have 3 different launch availabilities for hypersonics. Electron, which we've seen launch now 50 plus times, Haste launching like 4 plus times, and then hopefully Neutron within the next 6 to 12 months will have launched at least once, if not twice, within the 12-month time period. So to me, in terms of launch, you have amazing capability. And then coupling that with the satellite systems, you have a large forward outlook with respect to the Space Development Agency, regardless of what people think, what might happen with further Space Development Agency contracts. Solaro's proven itself time and time again. Flight software has been utilized on lunar landers. So, I mean, I don't know what other capabilities other than going to the moon ourselves as a prime contractor, going to Mars ourselves as a prime contractor is necessary to make people realize that this company is not some blowover, and that it's the real deal. And I continue to believe that this will be a $50 billion company very easily within the next 10 to 15 years. So pretty much a 5x from where we are today. And I think that that's a very conservative estimate. And once we get further on down the line and we see what happens with, say, the Flatellite, which will help, in my opinion, privatize specific internet communications through either the Department of Defense or foreign nations or commercial customers, I think that valuation could easily exceed over 100 billion, depending on what potentially that is used for and what kind of revenue streams and cash flows we could expect from that. So to me, yeah, I'd buy the dip, and I have.
Amazing. All right. So then we go on to the next one. We have had a podcast come out with who is this guy? I've never seen him before. I think he is Dick French, who is the VP Space Systems and Strategy at Rocket Lab, on this podcast. As I said, I didn't manage to watch it all the way through. I didn't get any new information about it, but maybe Matt, have you seen this podcast? No, okay. We skip over this one. Then the next news is that Rocket Lab has come out with a new product, which is, I think we will need Dave Huntsman's help here. So New Frontier in Radios, Rocket Lab announces expanded radio products for reliable command and control. And if you read this announcement, it says that they are capable, so they have all these bands that I don't understand what they do, and their new software based radio is now compatible with Deep Space Network, all other global ground stations, including Near Earth Network, Air Force Satellite Control Network, KSAT, SSC, Viasat, and other commercial networks. And this means that they can basically launch any mission to LEO, Moon, or outer solar system, and they can still communicate and have the radios. But I must say that the technical part of it is completely over my head. But luckily, we have an engineer with us, so maybe Matt can.
No, I'm far from a radio
oil
frequency
engineer.
Yeah, I'm basically a fake mechanical, chemical, and geologist all mixed into one. So it doesn't really help much from a radio frequency perspective. But the way I look at this is it's just a whole suite of different opportunities to use different wavelengths to either communicate large sums of data very quickly, or slower, or reduce reduce interference across different frequencies. So there's a whole slew of reasons why you might use a different band. I'm like you, unfamiliar with what particular bands are more useful, but I have seen a lot of people using Ka and Ku bands specifically for communications. Whether or not those are inner space communications or if that's more space to geo or Earth communications. Not 100% certain, but I think it's just a continued ability to basically find whatever and have a suite of whatever frequencies are necessary to be able to get whatever job done.
Yeah, I mean, what I read into this in between the tea leaves is that Rocket Lab is really leaning into being this one-stop shop for space, and then they are more and more ready. Like whatever you throw at them, it's like there's pre-made solutions, and they're really fast, are able to deliver what you need. And I guess this was just one step to further this. That's what I read into the
For
tea leaves
example,
here.
like you might only need super simple binary data to be able to understand if something has been moved or the reaction wheel has been activated on a satellite, right? But in order to be able to communicate a massive picture, like what we saw on Firefly, this is a perfect example. They were able to send a picture that was pretty hard to distinguish what actually you were looking at very quickly, like within a minute or so of what actually, like after landing on the moon. But it took a lot longer, and some people might say because they had to CGI it, but in reality, it's because you need a little bit longer to be able to transmit that data from that far away with that particular amount of quality. And it probably used a different type of band of communication to be able to do that. So it really just depends on what you're transmitting. Communications will probably use a different one rather than strictly like binary information or say digital information.
Well, thank you. You see, the oil engineer, I knew you could help us out.
I could make stuff up and make it sound frequent, or sorry, not frequent, somewhat
Coherent.
intelligent.
Yeah,
Coherent.
good.
That's a good one.
Cool. We go to the next one. So this is actually very, very big news. Milestone for Neutron development. Stage 2 looks like it's ready for flight and has passed a lot of qualifications tests. So half of the rocket is ready.
Kind
of. Half the rocket is pressing for flight. So what do you think about this?
Good. And obviously good to hear news. I think I was chatting with a fellow shareholder and coworker and friend, and they were upset that there hasn't been much news other than contracts being signed since like the November timeframe. But and I think there's some confusion. So I want to tell people this is strictly the tank test, right? So it's nothing to do with an Archimedes. So what would end up happening is right where you're kind of seeing the bottom end of this tank, you would potentially see the Archimedes attached to that and have a fire. So there's no second stage static test done at the moment. It's strictly just testing the materials in the tank itself. You can see in the picture on the right hand side the frost that's kind of within the on the tank to actually demonstrate what's actually going on. And I think it's pretty cool. You can see at the top that they're covering the top, and I think that's prudent of them to do, because obviously these guys are delivering satellites from a second stage, unlike a lot of other folks that are delivering them. If you guys remember, the second stage will actually sit within the first stage and kind of come out with that. And so it's going to be slightly different than how most second stages are actually delivered to space, because most second stages sit on top of the first stage and are then released that way. So I think it's pretty interesting. And there's a rendition of what the tank looks like with the Archimedes with the payload on top. But I think it's prudent to keep that covering on top to not show people what exactly they're doing, because it is different than what I've seen other companies do. So to be able to help deploy payload from a second stage like that is proprietary, in my opinion. Nobody else is really doing it that way.
Are you sure that it's because like if I read the thing, it does say stage 2 and not, because normally if it's the stage 2 tank, they say stage 2 tank, right? And it's funny, I do see that like the first comment is also like asking, like, just curious, won't stage 2 have an Archimedes engine at the bottom? How does stage 2 qualification work if the engine isn't attached yet?
So stage 2 tank has been qualified. Yeah, if you go to the website, there's still the need for the fire tests. So, and I actually wrote a pretty long.
So this is like sort of misleading then.
I don't think it's misleading at all. I think it's just if you know what further needs to happen and you're paying attention to what the checklist looks like, you'll see very further on that there's stage 1 static test, there's a stage 2 static test, and then a full wet dress and integrated test.
All right. Yeah, but big milestone. I think soon we. I mean, if they're going to launch this year, we soon need to see pieces of. This is exactly what we need to see. Just more of this.
Do you feel misled, Vince? It seems like you feel misled.
I don't know. I will look at it a bit more. I mean, it could, like, in my mind, I was thinking like it could be that they did the Archimedes like hot fire test and that like qualified the engine, and then like to do the full qualifications, like they needed to only qualify the tank, right? But if I read this, I definitely read like the understanding I get is like the full stage 2 is like through the qualifications test. It doesn't say through the hot fire and static fire and did I answer your question good or yeah? Okay, goody. So I just wanted to show you guys a statistic that Philip investing in space startups combined. And when I look at this, I'm like, we are going to have a neutron failure. The question is like, it's guaranteed. The question is just, is it going to be the first flight, the second, the third, the fifth, the seventh? And this chart basically shows, the chances of a rocket succeeding what does it say? I'm pretty sure that this shows the failures. So yeah, failure rate. Yeah. So 33% of first launches fail, which is a surprisingly low number. I would have thought that this number is high. Maybe they count like partial successes, and then you see as this number drops. And even on flight 10, rockets are very highly unreliable. I mean, if Scotto's calculations are correct, neutron or electron has like a 97% success rate, meaning a 3% failure rate. And here it says that the average, even at flight 10, is like 15%. So it's pretty crazy. You're muted, Matt.
Thanks to Adam and Tesla. It means a lot to see the support and love. But no, I think it's interesting. First and foremost, there's 83 launches is pretty impressive. Granted, it does exclude Iran and North Korea. So to me, it just goes to show how interesting. We're not talking about 83 vehicles most of the time when we have this chat, right? So we might talk about 4 or 5 different vehicles throughout the entirety of the show on most occasions. So most of the time, it's probably only 2 or 3.
And look at the N at the end.
Exactly.
So it's like half the rockets like die, like don't make it to launch 10.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. It just goes to show you like how like people are always talking about what's the moat. It's like the fact that they even still are flying to space more than 10 or 15 times. That's the moat. And I jokingly said like there's no moats in space, right? But if you think about like the legit like actual moat, a dad joke, sorry. But yeah, I think it's very interesting. I wasn't expecting to see the 15 percent all the way at the end, but I guess if you get to 10 flights, you're probably doing something right.
Yeah. Seems to be a rare thing to even get to that. Okay, so that was all the Rocket Lab news for the week, but there's a lot of space news actually this week. So I think we just run through them and then we talk about the markets, and then me and Matt will give personal financial advice, and we will tell you if you should buy Rocket Lab or not. I'm just kidding. Nothing here is financial advice, but
or is it?
Or is it? Exactly. So the next international news is we had a European launch attempt from Astra Aerospace, which is a German company. They were launching from Norway. And I believe that this launch pad that they launched from is the best looking launch site I have ever seen. And for those of you who have not been following, it ended in a spectacular boom. After like 30 seconds, the rocket started wobbling and then it fell back and it missed the pad, landed in the sea. So they can start trying again relatively soon. For me, the only implication that this has is that there's more and more launch providers, and Europe really seems to be trying to have their own launch and not have to rely on the Americans that can tariff them at any moment. Yeah, what do you think about this piece of news, Mr. Matt?
Well, I'm wishful. I'm hopeful that there's continued competition. We have obviously the European Space Agency, that is the NASA equivalent of Europe, but this was the first privatized, and I agree with you. Very beautiful launch pad. I watched it a couple hours after, so I think it launched. I think about a week ago. Tomorrow, I think it'll be about 6 or 7 days. I think it launched last Sunday. I think, and unfortunate that it didn't get too far up into the sky, but it did look like a successful liftoff initially. It was a little bit slower than I was expecting, but to eventually see it kind of wobble out and eventually, unfortunately, turn nose down was unfortunate, and hopefully it was a good learning experience. And the company has sufficient funds to be able to fund a second rocket. I think, yeah, it was pretty astonishing to watch. Even though I didn't watch it live, I watched it a couple hours afterwards, and it was definitely very, very jaw dropping, to see it. It was kind of like watching the Astra sideways launch again for the second time. You don't really know or have words to express it, but it just goes to show, it's not very easy. Space is hard. I think a lot of people on X said that, and I echo that sentiment. And it just goes to show, like, you can't just assume that you're going to become successful in this particular business. And while I hope that they have a second and third and fourth and maybe even 100th launch eventually, it just goes to show how much effort, right? And it goes to show how far behind in certain areas some of the other nations around the world are. And when it comes back to the whole macroeconomic environment, which we'll touch on again, people are like, oh, well, we'll just make European software companies, or we'll make European space companies. And it's like, well, if it's that easy, how come it hasn't already been done, right? Why are you still using Google? Why are you still using Facebook, etc.? It's not so simple all the time.
Because Europe didn't tariff them. No, I'm kidding.
There you go. No, well, also the regulatory environment, right? I don't even know. I want to know how difficult it has been.
Horrible.
Yeah, to be able to get these guys to the pad.
I just opened a new company. I started the application in December, and it literally opened now in April. And this used to be like a few years ago, like maybe a 2 weeks procedure max. And now it's like you have to do this know your customer with the bank. And the bank was going back and forth that, who can be in the board, who cannot be in the board. What is the company doing? Like, why do you want the company to be set up this way? And I'm like, shut the F up. Like, just open like, what do you have to do with this, And then, yeah. So the bureaucracy is, we need the Doge times 3 over here. Sorry, I cut whatever you were saying. You can just continue.
No, I was done. Yeah.
Okay, well, speaking about the devil, Astra raises from the dead, and they have new plans. They are planning the comeback for the ages, what's his name? Mr. Camp came on a podcast with Ashley Vance, which I have on my to watch list. And he has said some things that raised the hair on my back a little bit. He was saying that when the movie ended, like after that, they had like a profitable satellite division that was making satellites, and they were able to use the profits from that to invest into this Rocket 4. And I'm like, that cannot be correct. But yeah,
first I'm hearing that.
Yeah,
I heard they had a profitable, from what I understood, they had a somewhat profitable engine making business that they were hoping to then use and sell to the Department of Defense and things of the like, but that didn't go very far.
But so when they say profitable, I'm pretty sure it's a misleading way of saying like gross profit positive, because like
yes, product positive, but not company.
Yeah.
Interesting. I haven't watched it either. So yeah. I saw that they announced it. When was the actual release?
It was like 2 days ago or something like this. Maybe one. Maybe
I wasn't doing anything yesterday. I should have watched it. Interesting. It's just, I don't know. It's just, it hurts me. Sorry,
how does Curtis mean that his mannerisms were interesting? He was literally bombarded since they went private. I don't know what Curtis means, but yeah, I mean, look, I do get respect for Camp that he's like not giving up and they're like still going. Like that's very, very impressive to me, and that he's able to get financing. And at this point, I wish him luck. He also said in this interview that he was like he never had an animosity with Sir Peter Beck, and even Ashley Vance like jumped in and he's like, oh, to be fair, like both of you were sending me messages about each other, and yeah.
There you go. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, he was probably humbled. All right, we go to the next one. So again, lots happening in space. So it looks like Super Heavy is having a new test flight, and the booster is going to be a reused booster where 29 of the 33 engines are going to be flight proven. And I was reading what people said about this, and Eric Berger actually said that this is a super risky move because they have just had 2 straight failures, if you guys think about it. So yeah. Any comments on this one? How the program is coming along?
I could see that. Yeah, it is somewhat risky, and I just want to clarify. I don't think the failures have been on the actual booster stage 1. No. It's mostly been on the Starship stage 2 piece, and but I agree with you. It is kind of risky to continue, but at the same time, at the speed at which they want to continue and get to a place where they can be ready for a Mars launch, by the end of this decade, I think it's aspirational, and I think it's a good thing to be able to test. To me, I don't think you need to have a reusable booster to be able to get to Mars, but I think at the same time, if you have a reusable booster, while it might, I think, cause a short step in the next, say, 6 months or so if it doesn't go swimmingly, having a reusable booster would likely allow you to increase the frequency in which you launch and reduce the costs as well. And so that would allow them to put more research and development into maybe the further items, like how do they have fuel depots for them to refuel getting to Mars and things of the like things that'll actually matter and will actually allow us to truly set up long-term life on Mars. Now, this is me kind of thinking theoretically, but if you're able to get the launch down and hopefully Starship issues figure itself out, which I think is a little bit strange considering Starship has been a rather reliable vehicle for what I've seen in the first few launches that it had. So why the last 2 have been problematic is kind of a head scratcher. But this is well known that it will take, without sort of boosting yourself all the way to Mars and more so coasting, it'll take 6 months to be able to get there. And so, will you have the capacity to, have astronauts that want to go and take flight and go there for 6 months just to be on Mars for, say, less than a week maybe, and then fly back another 6 months. So it's a little bit tough. So to me, I think the thing that's going to be most important is setting up fuel depots, launching from Starship or Falcon 9 or other things where you can load up on particular fuels and boost yourself midway to be able to get yourself to a place where you have the ability to reload and cut down that journey from, say, 6 months to a couple weeks. That'll increase the frequency which we go to Mars and things of the like. So I think retesting, while not important for 2025, will help speed things up in the latter half of the decade and put R&D towards things that are more important.
Well said. Well said. Okay, so the next one, which is, again, hits home for Rocket Lab, is the Senate nomination hearing for Jared Isaacman is confirmed to be on the 9th of April. So it's going to be very interesting if we hear in the confirmation hearings anything about Rocket Lab and private space and what he's planning to do. And the minute he's nominated and approved by Senate, I guess we will get a lot more clarity on where NASA is going and what we can expect from there. Here's another interesting one. So Project Kuiper ULA is targeting a launch no earlier than 9th of April to send the first 27 Kuiper satellites into low Earth orbit. These are most probably with Rocket Lab reaction wheels. That's the ones that they are shipping. And this is competition to Starlink. What's your comment on this one?
I don't know yet. I don't know if I fully have come up with a personal opinion on Kuiper. I know a lot of people think it'll definitely put some brakes on Starlink's competitive advantage, but I personally haven't done much research on it. I don't know if you've done much.
No, I mean, all I know is that Starlink is not very cheap. Like, I actually looked at it for a friend because they lived on a farm in Denmark, and they were trying to get fiber connected to them, and it was like $5,000 or $7,000 to pull in the fiber, and plus it had to be that all the neighbors agree, so like everybody gets it at the same time or no one gets it. And then they had some very bad mobile internet that they had that was like cutting out half the time. Like, it was like very hard to, like, basically almost phone calls didn't work with them because you couldn't understand what they were saying. And Starlink would have been $90 a month, I think, after spending $500 for the terminal. And they decided to stick with the mobile and wait until the fiber is connected in, because for them the price tag was high. But then at the same time, I don't know if Kuiper comes online, if it's going to be a price war and then they're just going to go lower. And by the way, personally, with these numbers and with the waiting, I would have taken Starlink if I was them. I don't get why they didn't take it.
Yeah, I think for now I use Comcast Xfinity, but my mother lives in rural Pennsylvania, and we had something comparable with. I think it's just the fact that not a lot of people. It's more rural. Definitely not a lot of people that are moving in and out of that area. So we had to get our cord completely replaced, and it was like $100 or something for them to do the new wiring, and it was all rusted out and all that. And I think it was installed in the 70s or 80s when the house was originally built. And so, I think that was partly the reason. But I can understand $500 for initial hurdle is difficult to kind of come up with. And I think the broadband that my mom got was about $40, except for the fact that it kept cutting in and out. And then once they replaced the line, it stopped cutting in and out. So, a little bit more digestible to be $40 a month. But I think eventually in the long term, it'll be great. And I actually think whatever mobile internet I'll be able to use in the future, I'll potentially look at it. I mean, right now I'm mostly focused on living in Houston, but if I do end up having kind of my initial or long term thought of having properties in multiple countries and states, I mean, it might be more useful for me to bring a internet sort of receiver with me wherever I go, and just use that rather than specifically focusing on using a one particular connector. Because I don't need, like, if I'm going to multiple different locations, unless it's already an Airbnb, an established Airbnb, and who knows, it might be. But anyway, I've thought about it as well, especially if I ever got into like boating, or I don't know, going somewhere middle of nowhere, Mexico, just try to get lost for a little bit. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let us know. Let us know when you do get it. Then we can do YouTube from the middle of Mexico.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
It will be funny. You're like all sunburnt and like, I don't know where I am, but I can still see my stocks.
That's the thing. Yeah, I'm definitely a lobster when I get in the sun. So
Well, all right. So the next one we go to, and that is an interview came out with Eric Berger. He interviewed Butch and Sonny Wilmore, and it seemed like there was a lot more wrong with the Starliner on the way than they initially let on, and they very honestly talked about this, and they became very close to total catastrophic failure, which was very shocking to me. Like, I don't understand how such an established space company can make such a mistake. So did you have a similar thought when you read, or you heard about this? No,
for sure. Yeah, I think not necessarily this particular piece of feedback, but the feedback that the astronauts had given about would they be okay using Starliner. Because from what I've understood, it's not completely out of the question that Starliner, would not be used in the future. And they said they would potentially look at it as well. I think that they didn't feel like it was a complete failure, the astronauts' perspective, right? Not mine. That the things that they addressed could be done rather easily. So I don't know. I'm curious to see if that means it's it for Starliner, or if they're going to try it again. We'll have to see. But yeah, it seems like the things that they have. I mean, aren't. It's not like we're trying to put a man on the moon again, right? It's like, yes, you are trying to put people on the ISS, but it's stuff that's been done before. It's not like it's new technology, if that makes sense.
and it's also not the first issue that they had with this. So this is like a reoccurring issue that came up, I believe, on their test flight before this, and it came up on the like on the ground testing as well. And I'm like, how can you not fix it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, well, the last space news of the day is the company called SpinLaunch, which was very fascinating for me. Basically, it was a startup, and their idea was that they spin objects super fast, and then they basically throw them in space. And obviously, if this idea would work, then it would make, I don't know, it would cost like 5,000 to launch a satellite or something. Like, it would be insanely cheap. I even watched a documentary about them, and the thing is that when you spin these satellites, you spin them so fast that they're experiencing, like, I don't know, like thousands of G's, like insane pressure. So you have to build them in a special way, and then when you shoot them out, then there's no protection, because normally when you shoot satellites up, you have the fairing of the rocket, which protects them, and now, like, the satellite itself is pushing through the air and gets heated up, and you have to think with all these things. And this company went very quiet in 2022 when they did their first tests, and we didn't really know what was going on. and it looks like they are pivoting to basically having their own constellation from 280 satellites, and this would be a telecom constellation, and it will be delivered to space by two normal rockets. Could be Neutron. So they didn't say that the SpinLaunch concept is dead, but I mean they're not launching their own satellites with this SpinLaunch. So very interesting. What Matt? Any comments on this one?
Yes and no. I mean, I obviously don't know much about it, but from a centrifugal force perspective, I think you'll still need to have two types of launch. You'll either, if this does work, you could potentially use this for things that are going to low Earth orbit or geo orbit, stuff like that. The thing that I'm still thinking about though is the ability to launch humans into space and that piece of exploration. I don't think that would be capable to be done utilizing this sort of technology due to the potential G-forces you'd have to experience on Earth to be able to get it high up enough in the air when the rockets do kind of go off that you'd actually have some sort of advantage. So while this could help with respect to lowering costs for satellites and things of the like, I still think it's probably a pipe dream. We'll see. I would like to see that sort of competition started to arise, but I just think it's a little bit difficult to be able to get satellites that far up into space, and the rotating equipment associated with that and the reliability of it. I think it's going to be something that's going to be very difficult. I mean, you're talking about things that are hundreds of kilograms potentially to put into space or to circulate at a fast enough speed. I think that's going to require a lot of equipment, and with rotating equipment like that, you're always going to have issues.
Yeah.
But I'm no expert on it, right? So just cautiously optimistic that there's going to be some sort of benefit to it, and I think any competition is good competition.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is in this article, like the company reported that since they started, there was a lot of optimism in the launch business, but as the time went on, like it became clear that the launch business is like not really a profitable business. It's more like a loss leader, so you can get like satellites and constellations up, and they were like, yeah, the money is in services from space, and that's why they're sort of even abandoning or not I don't think they said that they're abandoning SpinLaunch, but like they are pivoting to this 280 satellites. So it's just so my question is like soon my own grandmother is going to have a constellation. There's so much constellation announcements, and yeah, who's going to fly all these constellations constantly up and down?
Could be you.
Yeah. All right, guys. So now we came to the financial advice part of the video, which is just a joke.
Full port.
So
saw everything else. Buy leaps.
Yeah. Leaps. Yeah. Out of the money and short
Super
expiry.
Far. Yeah, short expiry. Super far out of the money.
Cool. So I mean, for myself, I'm somehow like I don't have money. I was like obviously joking about starting the OnlyFans, but I need to figure out how I can send more money to the stock market, and I would be very heavily buying Rocket Lab, and there's many other companies that I think have unbelievable pricing at this moment. I think this is my favorite crash so far out of all the crashes, and I mean, if you're not buying now, like sure, it can go lower a bit. I mean, it can go lower a lot. We don't know what's going to happen, but there's this saying like, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. And I feel like, when the market is going up, everybody's a long-term investor and understands this. And now that the dip is happening, I mean, I even made like a Twitter post that like now is the time to buy, and then you read the comments and it's like, you're an idiot, like sure in the long term it goes up, but we at least have 20% more down, and it's like, sell, don't touch the market. And I just feel that we are at a historic opportunity. That's what I think. So Matt, what's your personalized financial advice that you guarantee to our viewers?
Yeah, I mean, you don't know. I think Peter Lynch did a really good piece of work, and it's from the 70s or 80s. So, I mean, take this with a grain of salt. But once every 6 years, we have a pullback that's of 20 to 25% or more, and we're from a broader market perspective, the Nasdaq has exceeded 20%, but the S&P has only gotten down to like 18 or 19% down comparatively to the recent highs. So, is there possibility for more? Yes, of course, but like you stated, there's already people that are wanting to come to the table with Uncle Donnie, as well as the fact that there's other positive catalysts like business tax cuts and other just company catalysts as well, right? Static tests that need to be done on stage 1, 2, more information about Flatellite, potential more contracts for Neutron, as well as the Neutron launch itself. I think that there's, and then following that, profitability. It's tough to say when any of these catalysts might align with each other, as well as what's to happen, say, come next week. So to me, as I've always done, it's something that if I see the price being somewhat attractive, regardless of whether or not I think it can go down another 10, 20%, I buy whatever I think is reasonable for that month. And it's easy for me to do this because I've set up my life and my financials to be able to be at a point where I'm investing multiple times per month, if not, up to 5 times per month. But, I'm always putting capital into the markets, into companies that I want to continue to grow positions in. And so, my hope is that people continue to do something similar. If they don't have money coming in or money's too tight, then figure out a way to cut costs. If this is something you're truly passionate about and helping yourself out of this particular point in your financial life, if you're saying, oh, this, what, and the other, but, have a decent amount of income where you can really put some decent amount of money into the portfolio. Otherwise, you'll put in $1,000 and see your Rocket Lab portfolio grow from $1,000 to $25,000 maybe. And that might be huge. That might be life-changing and beneficial for a year, but will that be forever, generationally life-changing? And the answer to that is probably no. So just if you're not necessarily getting your money right, figure it out a way where you can get to a place where you can invest very routinely. If this is the case and you're afraid that it might go down 20%, then just fully recognize that if you hold out, and we do hit a pivot point here next week, at about the 20% down on the total market, 50% down for the stock in general, specifically Rocket Lab, and it goes back up to 25 or $30, you might not have the ability to see this $15 range again, and who's to say, in the next 2 to 3 months, there still might be an opportunity where the markets don't recover and we're kind of still in this $15 to $16 range. But all it takes is a couple catalysts. All it takes is the Neutron launch, and then the fundamentals of the organization and its potential value gets changed significantly. And so to me, I'm always just buying. I thought it was a great price to buy in the low 20s. I was buying in the 30s. So, my thought process is 10 years, 20 years down the road, this company is going to easily be worth $50 to $100 billion, if not more so, with what I kind of see in the pipeline. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself. So for me, it's simple to be buying when it's below a $15 billion market cap, and in this case now below a $10 billion market cap. But you might think otherwise. You might want to hold on to your pennies. I can't make that decision for you. But my hope is that if you're hesitant here to add money, not just to Rocket Lab, but in any company, then it sounds like you have too little money to be really fearful of it. Or you might just be in a part of your life cycle where you shouldn't be taking on exorbitant amounts of risk. And that's also a mature thing to notice as well. If you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe Rocket Lab isn't a kind of company, and hopefully you recognize that if you're sitting down on a 50% loss because you bought in it at the 30s, and that's, you're getting closer to retirement, maybe this isn't the stock for you. It's something that maybe you should think about putting more so into CDs or something that are more worthwhile, that don't have the volatility that you might have into the equities market, or more specifically the space market for stocks. So I just hope, all in all, regardless of whether you buy or not, that this is a learning experience, specifically for newer investors that might be going through their first large pullback.
Yeah, and I found the best advice so far that I've seen, and that was from Scott Cross here. And he says that the minute that the fear greed index goes negative, he will start buying. So that gave me a very good laugh. So yeah, I mean, some of the things I've seen some charts that, like when the market has fallen this much, I mean, it is a little bit like stocks astrology, but still it's the statistics. Like I think 80% of the time, like 2 weeks from the point, like the market was green, and then like 1 month from that point, the market was something like 85%, the market was green. So I think if you look at any indicator like VIX, the sentiment on Twitter is just so freaking negative. I mean, the fear and greed index, I don't remember ever seeing it that it's almost negative, even though it
somebody shared a note from a UBS analyst, and I think it might be pertinent for this moment. Do you mind if I read some of it?
No, you want to put it on, or
I can just read it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I don't know how to hide. I have like numbers of people in here, and it's coming from my WhatsApp, so I don't want to give people's numbers away for their privacy. So just a few different snippets from a few different companies. So this is UBS Chief Investment Office, Global Wealth Management, and this is coming from March 2025. When fear manifests itself in investor sentiment and the volatility index spikes, the VIX, just as history shows us with the financial crisis, the COVID crash, and more recently the bear market in 2022, this is a bullish contrarian indicator that we are at or close to a bottom with above average returns to come. In fact, the American Association of Individual Investors weekly survey indicated only around 21% of investors expect stocks to go higher in the next 6 months. And this is more pessimistic than 94% of all the past readings since its establishment in 1987. After previous readings like this, the S&P 500 has delivered on average 8.7% returns over the following 6 months and an average of 16.7% returns over the following year. And then coupling that up with stock market corrections and subsequent year returns. And this is coming from First Trust and Bloomberg, and this is at the end of December 2024. Even though investors like to avoid market declines at all costs, as they always feel painful, pullbacks and corrections are normal and healthy for the market as they help recalibrate investor sentiment, facilitate price discovery, and reset valuations. As we have said before, pullbacks of 5% or more happen 3 times per annum, with the last one occurring in August 2024. Corrections of 10% or more happen every 16 months or so, with the last one happening in August of 2024. And corrections of greater than 10% or more happen. Oh, sorry, I just read that. With the last one being October 23 for the last 10% correction. Sorry. Corrections of 15% or more occur every 3 years, with the last one occurring in October of 2022. And bear market drawdowns occur about every 5.5 years on average, with the last one being October 2022. A history of market corrections, markets in perspective, and that's from Bloomberg, and then coupling that again with Bloomberg. Although we don't know how long this current one will last, history shows us that the market begins to recover way before we get the all clear. And I've seen many times before when the market pullbacks this quickly, when the markets pull back this quickly, as we have seen over the last month, the velocity of the recovery tends to be just as fast. So you don't want to be on the sidelines when this is happening, meaning in cash in this perspective. That analyzing the stock market corrections like we are currently experiencing and subsequent annualized returns, following a correction like the market, like this one, on average, it's up 24.3% over the next year. And over the next 2 and 3 year periods, it has averaged 17.5% and 13% per annum, respectively. So exactly what you stated, Vince. It's very much when these sorts of markets happen. Now, of course, obviously when you have a 15% pullback, you'll probably have to get close to a 20% return just to get back to even. But even still, it just goes to show you that with the 15-20% pullbacks, you definitely need to be in the markets when you have that. Otherwise, you'll lock in, unfortunately, those losses.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if this helps anyone. Like for me, it was a game changer when I understood this. So when like the reason why people say that when the taxi driver gives you stock advice, that's the time to sell. It's because we all know that the stock price goes up on supply and demand. So if there's a lot of demand for stocks, the price goes up, right? And for the price to continue to go up, you need like a bigger and bigger and bigger group of people to continue buying the stock with ever bigger money, right? So first, normally you have the institutionals, like that was the past. Currently, it's like first you have the retail, and then Wall Street catches on, and then the news starts talking about like, oh, Palantir, and then the average folks start to get FOMO and they open brokerage accounts to buy Palantir. And then when the shoe shiner tells you about Palantir, he's probably the last one. Like there's not a bigger circle to be buyers. So suddenly like everyone who wanted to buy Palantir bought it. And then there's no more buyers left. There's only sellers on the market. And then when there's only sellers on the market, then the price crashes. And it's the same on the reason why this is such a contrary indicator is because for the market to go down, you need an ever bigger and bigger and bigger numbers of people to sell. So first you have the perma bears who sell, and then you have the careful people who sell. And then when you start seeing like the bulls, like the guys who are like always bullish, like the Dan Ives, when he starts panicking, who is next? Like there's no other guy who, like anybody who wanted to be safe and wanted to trim their portfolios and wanted to get out, they did at this point. So now you will have a market where there's no more sellers and you only have buyers. And this is why this is why when everybody's bearish, it's time to buy, because this phenomenon will happen. I don't know if this helped anybody, but for me, it was like a real game changer when I understood this.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think, you're already down 20%, right? So in this particular case on Rocket Lab, you're down 50%. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, like the market is down 20%, but I mean, you look at the stocks that retail owns. I mean, Rocket Lab down. What is it? 50. Palantir down. I don't know. 35. Robinhood
45.
Down.
Yeah.
Yeah, Robinhood also down. I believe 50%. Enphase. It's let's not even talk about that one. So there's a lot of stocks are super down, not just 20% down.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. So for most companies, you're on a rather even playing field. If they're all down, say 50%, like Palantir, like you stated, is down 45%, Rocket Lab's down 50%. You have all these companies that are all down 50%. Find the ones that you like the most, right? You might have invested in something because the market was going up and it was risk on, and things like ASTS, even though they're pre-revenue, were running. It's not to say that it's a bad company. I'm just using an example here as a pre-revenue company. And you might say, actually, I'm a little bit older now. I was investing like I was 20. I'm actually in my 50s. Like I need to invest in something a little bit more stable than, maybe ASTS, which is pre-revenue and has some risk potentially, might not necessarily be, the opportunity that you might be looking for. You might want to look for something that is less has a lot less risk and might already have revenue. I'm not saying that's Rocket Lab, but it could be something like Google. It could be something like Amazon, something where it might be maybe not as high of returns, but you have that opportunity to potentially lock in less risk kind of going forward. So to me, I don't necessarily agree that like you need to dollar cost average on all your positions. I look at opportunities like this when the market is up, and I look at opportunities like this when the market is down to say, do I actually believe in this company, or am I just, and to be very honest, like there was a lot of companies like SoFi, for example, when the market started to shift, where I was like, I like SoFi. I think SoFi is going to be great. And I hope everyone that is a SoFi shareholder continues to do well. And in fact, I think it's a great opportunity to buy into SoFi here if you're not invested. But I'm more convicted in a company like Rocket Lab that I think will eventually grow much faster in the long term than something like a SoFi. I think that SoFi's made a lot of its easy gains, and to be honest, I think that Rocket Lab is a much further trajectory from here to, let's just say, 2030, 2035, where I think it could go up much faster pace than something like a SoFi. So it's not to say that I didn't believe in SoFi. It's just when you only invest in, 5 to 10 stocks, you have to be very competitive about what's in your portfolio. So I have a lot of people ask me, like, what do you think about this company? It's like, well, I think it's great, but I don't have an investment, nor do I have enough due diligence on it. And so it's okay to not stretch yourself so thin, and that unfortunately might mean that you miss out on some great winners. Like I missed out on HIMS because I, wasn't really looking after it, and just didn't want to necessarily be in that space. And I've been invested in companies like that in the past where I've gotten burned. And so that might have been a bias. And unfortunately, that bias caused me to miss out. But at the same time, I found great companies like Rocket Lab and many others that I think will continue to do well going into the future. So use this time when you have the opportunity to look at different companies that you don't like or may have invested in because everybody was investing in everything, and no matter what you did, it was shooting fish in a barrel and the market was going up. But now that we're not in that case, and we potentially might be in, some economic turmoil in the future, find the ones that you like and double down on those.
Great wisdom. We all need to be more like Matt. Awesome, guys.
No, not necessarily. Invest what your needs are.
All right. Our needs are to make a lot of money, like Matt. So we all need to be more like Matt. No. Cool. Thank you, everyone, for being on this podcast this week. I think it was an exciting week. We can definitely tell, our future kids and friends and family that, the Trump crash of 2025, we lived through it. So make sure that, you keep buying the dip and you set your life up that you can always invest. Don't miss great opportunities, and I'll see you next week. Ciao, ciao.
I think so.